Oh, there's a puddle here. Forgot about that spot. There are many. Hello and welcome. Speaking of which, we're into the last few days of the Vasa, the rains retreat, they call it, or the rainy season in this part of the world. I think it continues a little bit longer down this far south, but where the Buddha comes from, in the northeast of India, historically, I mean, who knows these days, but the monsoon time was between the full moon of July and the full moon of October. So that coming up in a few days, the full moon of October, Uposita Day, or Poya Day as they call it here in Sri Lanka. It's a government holiday here, being a Buddhist country, as are all of the full moon days, respected as such. And it's also the end of this special time, this 3 months, that monks or nuns, bhikkhus or bhikkhunis, remain in one place. They stay in their place for that 3-month residence, to save walking about in the rain, damaging crops and getting themselves wet. The Buddha made this a rule. It's a significant time for many monastics around the world. I notice just from the few YouTube channels from monasteries or teachers I'm familiar with that I subscribe to, there are a lot less contributions, less videos, just generally, I think, because a lot of monks and nuns are themselves in retreat, which is a little bit of a foreign concept to me, this idea of monks and nuns going on retreat. And forgive me, please, brethren, Sangha, if I'm speaking out of turn, but I ordained for the purpose of being in retreat permanently. Now, we don't, of course, all have that opportunity, I guess, and maybe have to live in monasteries where things are a little bit more active. There are duties. So you pick certain times of the year, and there are usually 2 in the West, in the upper hemisphere, the western part of the world, Europe, UK, USA. They'll take the winter season, maybe January through to March, and also this traditional season, to have set times for the monks to go off on their individual retreats, practicing in solitude in the forest, in their kutis, within the parameters of their monastery. So having less interaction with the public, less interaction with the other monks and nuns. And that is something very important. If lay people can do that, go on these retreats, whether it's for 10 days, 14 days, 3 months, a year, 3 years, or maybe live in a monastery for the rest of their lives, or even consider ordination. It's a way of practicing 100% of the time for part of your life. We can't ordain the minute we're born. We have to wait until we're 20 years old before we're allowed to become fully ordained. But thereafter, there's nothing to stop anyone doing that. With the exception, you have to have permission from your parents, you have to be in relatively good health at that stage when you ordain anyway. You might become sick, older and sicker later, of course you will, but at the time of ordination you should be in good health. Then you have the opportunity to just practice. Now, in the forest monasteries of Thailand that I've stayed in, and many around the world, this is what you do. But of course, places get busy, popular, and therefore duties become abound. You know, it gets a little bit more cluttered in some places, so they designate these times. I say it's a little bit foreign, that concept, to me, because I've been fortunate to just be in monasteries whereby I've either kept myself separate from that and just practiced meditation as best I could for most of the time, or I've integrated it and seen it as part of my practice. And that's what they always tell you at these busy monasteries. Well, it's all part of your practice. Just nama rupa, they say. It's already busy, hundreds of people coming to see you, all of this chanting all day long. Nama rupa, it's just the body and the thinking brain. But that which knows, the citta, is just observing. You're either enjoying of this or you're not enjoying of this. You're liking or you're disliking. It is the citta that has viveka. Viveka is refuge or protection, seclusion. So like shutting yourself away in a little hut in the forest or going into a cave in solitude, we would refer to as kaya viveka. This is where you shut yourself away from the world physically, your body and your thinking brain. But citta viveka is where the mind, that which knows, is shutting itself away or taking refuge. Like we hear the term a women's refuge or maybe men's refuge, a place where you go for safety, protection. Citta viveka can be anywhere, not just in a monastery, even in a busy city, a busy town. One can invoke citta viveka by bringing your attention to something that is present in the moment here and now. And what can that be? Well, the breath, a very good meditation object. This is where anapanasati, this practice of meditation, comes from, the teachings of the Buddha. He shows us how we can observe something simple, like the simple activity of breathing in and breathing out, and derive much satisfaction, joy and pleasure from that. Mental joy, physical pleasure, from just the sheer knowing of breathing in long, breathing in short, breathing in deep, breathing in shallow, quickly, slowly. This observation is taking our minds away from all of the other distractions in life and bringing them into what? The present moment, here and now, but most importantly within the body, where we are physically able to witness, see, know the physical feelings as they arise, maybe stay a while, and as they pass away. So what better meditation object is there than that breath, which you can take into the busy cities along with you at all times? Continually centering yourself on the spot, whatever's going on around you, whether you're in the bus queue or you're waiting at the ATM, or indeed you're one of these busy monks who only gets a certain time of year to have a retreat, and you live in a busy monastery where there's all sorts of jobs going on, construction, building, lay people to look after, or they're looking after you, but you know, you're entertaining them, giving them Dharma talks, keeping everything, all the balls or plates juggled in the air. Maybe you're a responsible abbot, something like this. You know, this is the time when you can stop, take a moment and observe the breath. Notice these things. So this is what they say. This is how we're taught or trained as monks. Because of course we all live in monasteries for a good amount of time, the first 5 years of our ordination anyway. And then you can have a choice. You can stay in that environment or you can go off on your own. And you know, I chose to do that because I find being alone is not really being alone. Kaya viveka supports my citta viveka, and I may be alone by way of company of other human beings, but I'm surrounded by nature. But we don't enter into too much what we call sampa palapa, idle chit-chat or useless chat. Okay, I say the odd useless thing to this cat, my friend here, or by way of expressing my sort of loving kindness and compassion towards all beings, not just the cat. You know, I'll speak sometimes to the spiders or to the ants, especially if I accidentally harm one. I mean, I get quite apologetic sometimes, because you can, occasionally you can be sweeping and accidentally you know, break something's little creature's antennae or leg or something like this, and you know, you feel awful for having done such a thing, because they're your kalyanamitta, they're your friends, your friends on the path when you're living alone. These little things might go a little bit more unnoticed when you're surrounded by human company, whom you might be chitting and chatting with, chatting about the weather, chatting about the next duties on the work roster, or who's coming next, the next function, the upcoming Pawarana celebrations. That's the Thursday, Poya days, end of Vasa, full moon ceremonies, which are respective requests for forgiveness of all of the Sangha, all of the monks coming before their Sangha to seek forgiveness and for anything they may have done of body, speech and mind during this 3-month retreat period. For me, I just have the cat to ask for forgiveness of, because I've been alone. And for my support here, I don't even rely on support coming to me, which is somewhat unusual here in Sri Lanka. And I think I know the reason why. But I go each day on Pindapata, on alms round, as I used to in Thailand, to collect my meal. So I go to the houses, I visit the people in the village and go on into the town. And nowadays I get a lift back, but I used to walk all the way back also. But I got a little bit too much. It's still a good 3.5 miles. No, that's too much. 3.5-4 kilometers that I walk every day. So it used to be sort of 8 to 9, depending on the route I took. But even that, it's enough. But I go out, and what I get in my bowl is the meal, my sustenance for that day. But actually more common here with the temple monks here in Sri Lanka, whom are living in communities, is that the people go and offer dana at the monasteries, or at the temples as they call them here more often, because they are really sort of temples, places of worship. But they can be also schools or places where they're training monks, or they may be having meditation retreats. But I understand that when Buddhism came to Sri Lanka in the very earliest stages of this Buddha Sasana, this Buddhist religion, some just a couple of hundred or maybe a few hundred years after the Buddha's parinibbana, so his final death of his physical body and thinking brain and attainment to parinibbana, which is final nibbana, freedom from rebirth, after which his legacy was the Sangha, this body of monks and nuns, whom he instructed to go north, south, east and west, and not proselytize. We don't get on a soapbox and preach, we don't give sermons, we don't convert, but to just represent Buddhism as the Sangha by stopping in a place, living alone in solitude, peacefully, making no impact on the natural surroundings around you, almost being invisible, with the exception of perhaps definitely each and every day, walking, so never living too far from a town or village. About 1 mile is the usually allowed amount. So I'm about 1 mile, I'm probably nearer to the nearest house, is only a few hundred yards, but not too far that you can't walk in bare feet with your bowl every day to interact with the community, not by way of conversation and not by way of begging and asking. Although we're mendicants, we're beggars, we're monks in that respect, we're not allowed to request or ask of anything unless someone has given us a specific promissory note to say, please ask me for anything you need up to a certain amount, in which case we can. Please don't give me those. I never know what to do with those notes. I have to give them to other monks because I'm more than adequately provided for with just robes and my 1 meal a day. That's enough, and some shelter. I like to keep to the very basics. I don't need a new pen or a new notebook, or I'm not saving up to buy a copy of the Tritipika or anything like that. No. A little bit of food in my bowl is more than enough. And that's what the Buddha instructed monks living who've gone out from where they were in northeast India, north, south, east and west, to spread the Dharma, but in a passive way. So what happens is people see this observation of this Sangha, as the Buddha did, coming out of his palatial environment, seeing a samana walking peacefully and calmly, and having seemed to have developed some form of serenity about himself and a presence without materialistic support, but with just the sheer support of people just giving him a little bit of food and some robes. He saw this as one of the great messengers that drew him towards the establishment of this sasana in the first place. That's a whole nother story which I've spoken of before and no doubt will again. But for now, our instructions were to just simply go into the village, and if people give you food, great. If not, walk on. People are kind, so people do. If they see a monk with a bowl, put some food in your bowl. And there's no necessary conversation taking place, necessarily. In fact, we just either accept or we can politely decline, for instance, if it was some raw food, because we cannot cook. This maintains our dependence on laymen and laywomen. And that is the support for bhikkhus, monks, men, and bhikkhunis, nuns, ladies, in this tradition. But when they came south, so they came from what is, I sort of suppose now, Bangladesh, but that used to all be part of India, on the boats down straight, in a straight line, the Bay of Bengal to Sri Lanka. And then from the south of India, the ruling region of King Ashoka, into Sri Lanka from that direction, they brought with them an established religion that had been also set in place here in Sri Lanka at some point by the prince, the son of Ashoka, that ruling king in southern India, and established a very firm footing here because it was very well respected by the ruling parties of this nation. And they were immediately set up in temples and monasteries. So even later on, arriving monks would go straight into ready established communities. And there was no need for them, in that sense, to spread the word, to go out on this Pindapata activity, but to be there and available for people to come and see them in their places of worship, which had become so, with stupas containing relics of the Buddha, with the cutting from the original Bodhi tree from Bodh Gaya that was brought here, in the hair of the princess of this King Ashoka, something like that, and planted there at Anuruddhapura up in the north and central part of this country. And a very holy site, regarded as such by Buddhists from all over the world, and especially here, along with the others within this country, as well as the holy sites in India that we know of, the Buddhist holy sites there. So it came here almost established and self-contained to be able to just be in communities and temples that already exist and be supported within those without the necessity to go out on Pindapata. And I mean, I too have been offered such places to go and stay, and people would come here. And on the occasions, the very few, I think only 1 or 2 occasions, I haven't gone out on Pindapata. That has indeed happened. People have realised, so they've come here and brought me my food for the day. So I don't know why I've gone completely off track with what I was going to talk about. I was going to go through some of the comments and questions that I've received, but maybe I might just leave some of those until tomorrow now, and just carrying on with this idea of practice and retreat and kaya viveka and chitta viveka being our main objective. But when I say seclusion for the body, the physical body, seclusion for the brain, thinking brain, which we can refer to as kaya viveka, chitta viveka is seclusion of the mind. And one comment I did notice that was there was just to remind someone, well, what is this chitta again? And understandably, this word can be confused. And there is no really direct, specific, and of course it depends in which language is your mother tongue, but in English good translation for the word chitta, because we have the word nama. I mentioned earlier nama, rupa. Rupa is the body. Nama is usually translated as mind. But what it means by mind in that sense is the thinking brain. So this actual grey matter up here that is cognitive. It considers all that's going on in the physical body and develops the corresponding emotions that develop various chemicals and things and send them back in through the nervous system to, you know, govern your reactions. I think this is all basically how it works. But to some extent, all of this is the same thing. Kaya, the part of the body, the thinking brain. When you die, that dies also. It also contains memory. It also contains, so that's everything that's happened in the past that draws you to certain conclusions, feelings and opinions and judgments about what you see in the present moment because of memories and experiences you may have had previously. And also imagination, that is speculation and expectation about the future based on experiences of the past and what you're experiencing in the present moment here and now. But this practice and this place of kaya viveka, or this place of chitta viveka, is within this very present moment here and now, excluding those events of the past and imaginations of the future, because those events of the past have happened and cannot be changed. The events of the future may not happen and cannot be made to so. So therefore, all we have is this present moment. And what knows this present moment is the mind. So as opposed to nama, the thinking brain, not the mind, nama, their chitta is the mind. That which knows of these emotions created by nama, the thinking brain. So when you're happy, you know you're happy. When you're sad, you know you're sad. But what knows you're happy isn't necessarily happy, and what knows you're sad isn't necessarily sad. But it still knows. It knows, this chitta knows. You're sitting, you're in meditation, you're fully present in this moment here and now, with no regards to what's happened in the past and without speculation about what might happen in the future. And at that moment, within that breath, as you breathe in, there is immense peace, tranquility, and joy. Because even pain requires time to be evident. If you have a pinprick of pain, say you're receiving an injection and a vaccination, something like that, it's so momentary, that experience, that we do not describe it as pain. But if you have a similar pinprick and then wiggle the pin around continuously for a length of time, it would become painful, sore, and described as such, felt as such, seen as such. But when we isolate our attention span right into the present moment here and now through this practice, then we are secluding ourselves. When I say ourselves, I mean you're secluding your physical body and your thinking brain from that experience. All experience of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and emotional or mental concept, emotions arising as a result of those 5 senses you are secluded from within that present moment. And this is chitta viveka. This is the mind observing the here and now, the present moment. Now, this doesn't just come about. It requires, in some, many, many years and many, many decades of practice. In others, not long at all. Depending on your karma, your previous activities within this life, and previous lifetimes. If you discount the idea of previous lifetimes, that's up to you. But you've come into this lifetime. You've been born into aging, sickness, and death. You came from somewhere. Now you may consider this to be just biological, chemical, physics, whatever, but you're here now. So you are the result of causes and conditions, pachaya, that have brought about, so that is through actions of body, speech and mind, causes and conditions that have been created, there are results, a fruition, vipaka, that you are now experiencing. In the present moment, all you can determine is what you are experiencing, how you are experiencing it now. But that will have the consequential effect on the next moment to come. So if you start getting all worked up about the pain in the present moment, that will continue into the next moment. But when you see through the practice of wisdom that this pain is just temporary, it's impermanent, albeit unsatisfactory and out of your control, you may, through experience, yes, but through knowledge of anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, suffering and not self, be able to step away as the observer, as the witness, and know that in this present moment, here and now, it's just like the pinprick, momentary, and will not necessarily continue to irritate you, aggravate you, annoy you, create anger as an emotion within you into the future. And this is the slow, gradual practice of developing citta viveka, that skill to have this seclusion, whether you're living in a monastery, a busy monastery, with many visitors and all things going on, ceremonial-wise, or whether you're living entirely alone in solitude in a cave. It in fact should make no difference. But until you're attained to a certain level of practice, of course it does make a difference. Now a temple, a monastery is more conducive to practice, as it's orientated all around, receiving visitors who will be practicing noble silence. You'd like to think so, hope so anyway. Your colleagues or your brethren or your sisters, your fellow Sangha, also will be practicing in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path as you are. So your environment is fully supportive with all of its rules. 227 precepts for monks and 311 for nuns, to support them keeping these main core precepts of causing no harm and making little impression on all that surrounds you, becoming invisible, blending into nature. Whether you're in a city or in the forest, it is the same, that we become impactless and use as little as possible by way of resources, which is why we lead such simple lives. Now this, yes, in a monastery environment is more easily practiced, and that is the choice we have, whether as lay people to go on retreat or whether as ordained monks and nuns to make it as a permanent commitment throughout our lives, or for a length of time anyway. But in lay life, you can set aside moments throughout your day, always, to bring your attention, your conscious awareness back to just the breath, back to the breathing. Just stop and stand still on your way from the desk to the coffee machine, or on the way from the coffee machine to the photocopier. Just stop for a moment when it's convenient, for a few seconds only. Maybe watch 1, 2 or 3 intakes of breath. Stop for a breath. It's an expression you might hear quite often. People say, just breathe, when someone's all stressed out. These are very valid comments. They are practicing Buddhism in part, in that you are just coming back to awareness of the body here and now, in that moment. And there you get this glimpse of citta viveka. So what is the citta? Well, the citta is the mind. That which knows, the mind. It isn't in a location. It isn't within a location, within this physical body. It's not in your skull. That's the thinking brain. So nama, as in nama rupa. Rupa body, nama brain is brain. Chitta is the mind. So what is it that falls in love? It's not your thinking brain. Falling in love is not a logical process. The chitta is that which knows. The chitta is the mind, and it is the mind that knows you're in love. The thinking brain, yes, is responsible for creating the emotions and necessary or corresponding chemical reactions and hormones or whatever that gives the physical feelings, because emotions have their bodily corresponding physical feelings, just as your bodily physical feelings have their corresponding mental emotions. The two go hand in hand. So if you have a pain in your knee, you have a corresponding disliking in your brain to that pain, aversion. If you have anxiety about an upcoming event in your brain, then you have a corresponding physical feeling in perhaps your solar plexus or your central torso. Maybe you might refer to it as butterflies or an upset tummy, something like this, that's purely physical in relation to that mental emotion. The two are interrelated. But that which knows all of that which is going on, and separate from that, is chitta. Chitta viveka. Now there's two other vivekas we refer to, which I can't remember in the Pali. I'm going to look them up. I don't often do this, but if I have them on here somewhere in my little book, if I've mentioned chitta viveka and kaya viveka, I should refer to the other four. 3. I think we'll have to just consider it that I don't know, I can't remember. But kaya viveka is the bodily seclusion, so being in this nice little hut here, secluded mostly from the elements. The rain does come in a little bit, but not so as it's a problem. It's not exactly cold here, it's pretty warm most of the time, and this is my seclusion for the body and the thinking brain. But the most important seclusion we have is that for the chitta, that which knows, which is always with you. Now this chitta is affected by, swayed by, all of our actions of body, speech and mind in relation to our defilements, we call kilesas. So those in English, or in the Pali words, are lobha, dosa, moha, but in English are greed, hatred and delusion. And the reason we go on these retreats, the reason we practice the Noble Eightfold Path of moral virtue, sila, meditation, samadhi and wisdom, panya, is to eradicate these defilements, these kilesas, because those are what gives the chitta momentum by way of our actions of body, speech and mind in the creation of causes and consequences. So karma, in those actions, karma means actions, their results, vipaka, will propel, push forward, give momentum to this chitta into its future, whether that be into the next lifetime or the next occurrence within this lifetime. Even within this lifetime we have many rebirths, from being a child, a pupil at school, a student at college or university, a career person, a married person, a family person, a retired person. These big changes in our lives, continually ongoing, governed by the previous life within this life, how they will be. If you don't work all your life, your retirement perhaps might not be very satisfactory. But it should be the case, if you work hard throughout your life, or beginning with, you become educated, you get a good job, you work hard, you then save up enough money for a pension to retire comfortably and enjoy the savings that you have and live until you die. This is the conventional idea of rebirth within this lifetime and one life determining how the next life will be. Well, very much like that, rebirth in the sense of how we understand it in Buddhism isn't the reincarnation of a soul, this personality which is not there. After all, that pupil at school was nothing like this retired old man playing bowls or golf or whatever he's doing in the present moment. Two entirely different personas, and unless you are that person or someone very close to that person, perhaps may not be even distinguished, or would be distinguished as two entirely different characters if someone who didn't know them was to see them. But it's the same person. This is how shallow this idea of personality, ego, is, and how we understand this lack of persona and establish Sakaya Ditti, this personality view. We are able to eradicate this view of what we consider and call ourselves self, which is this this characteristics of existence of there being no self, just the result of causes and conditions we've put in place. So understanding, knowing all this, we are able, having developed that wisdom, and with time and with practice, which in a more conducive environment like a monastery, to take that and use that seclusion of that wisdom in providing refuge and protection for the mind, and therefore giving ourselves this feeling of equanimity, upekkha, equanimity of unreactiveness, not uncaring, full understanding, but not having to jump and react at the slightest thing. Oh no, I've got a pain in my knee. This must be leading to this or that. That's what's going to happen next. No, just to know pain, it's arising, it will pass away, or it may stay for the rest of this lifetime anyway. Unreactiveness, which is, after all, overreaction or any reaction that isn't necessary. If a bus is coming your way, you step out of the way, yes. But if you have a pain in your knee or a headache, it's just there. Know it as just there. We develop upekkha. This helps us establish tranquility, peace, calm, this state of mind we call samatha, this passaddhi, peace, developed through the practice of samadhi, developed through the establishment of vipassana, seeing clearly. Now I may be using some words there slightly out of what you consider to be their usual context. Some people consider samatha to be the same as samadhi, which it is not. Some people consider vipassana to be a practice. Well, it is in some respects, but really it's a quality. It's the development of seeing clearly. Samatha is peaceful, tranquil states of mind. Samadhi is absorption in focused conscious awareness of one meditation object solely, until you become secluded from the hindrances, secluded from thought and feelings. So seclusion from what we call the five aggregates, the khandhas that make up the nama and the rupa. And those are the khandhas of the body, the physical body. Those of feelings, so corresponding emotional feelings of the thinking brain. Those of perception, so ideas born of memory, and expectation of the future, judgment of those feelings or of those physical experiences. And mental, so physical, thinking brain, awareness of that presence as a whole. And the citta is separate from that, observing that. And in jhana, and in jhana only, so deeply absorbed states of samadhi, meditation, this can be experienced, is experienced. And this is, when secluded from the 5 hindrances, where there is no central desire, aversion, laziness, restlessness and worry, or doubt, and also seclusion from the senses of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thought, but just conscious awareness of your very presence here and now in this present moment, you will glimpse momentarily the state of nibbana that cannot be timed or clung to, because you will be pulled back into, through our attachment and our clinging, into, as we're still alive, into this physical body and thinking brain. But you, throughout this process, can maintain full awareness of this. And this is the purpose. This is why we sit in retreat or meditation for hours on end, experiencing not just peace, tranquility, and samatha of mind, not just rapture and physical pleasures of the body and joy, pain-free, but a stage further than that into the jhanas of seclusion from all of that, in kaya viveka and chitta viveka. That citta being secluded from even having to be concerned with what's going on with the body. It's still alive, it's still going, but in a very subtle way. So I hope that people, monks, nuns, laymen, lay women, have had the opportunity in this 3 months to enjoy their retreat time. But more importantly, I hope we all continue to enjoy retreat time momentarily, daily, at every opportunity that we have. Rather than in the bus queue or standing in the queue at the ATM, looking at that phone screen, checking the next notification, checking this, checking that. Have your hands by your side, with your eyes just gently open a little for safety, but just bring your attention to the breath and see the difference it makes. Now, I have a rule. I did veer off this rule for a little while, and I will not look at my, I have no notifications on this phone. They're turned off. Any apps, anything like this on there, all notifications are off. It's also always on silent, not even vibrate, it's on silent. So I have to pick it up, literally look at it to see if anything's happened. Unfortunately, nothing ever has happened because I'm not actually subscribed to anything to let me know if anything has happened, and I have no social media or anything like this. But I do check my emails because you correspond with me by email, and I try to reply to all of those. And I do check all of the comments as they come to me in one form, in one place on here, that I receive as a result of talking to you like this in these videos. But only once a day, and not every day. Maybe one day, sometimes 2 days, I don't pick it up at all. But I try until after the meal, usually just before I sit down and talk to you now, I then at around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, sit down with a cup of coffee, and I then pick up my phone, the phone, I should say, it's not really mine, your phone, and I read your emails and reply to them, and I try to reply to them all, and your comments, and I reply to them briefly, but I have read them. And where there's a question, I then usually take a little screenshot so that then when I sit down next time like this, I can discuss that question like this. That's the only time I look at any notifications. Now, of course, you as lay people will have to be aware and have your notifications on, and I appreciate that you can't be doing that all of the time. But we all have to admit that most of the time, when you're looking and picking up your phone to look at it, it isn't that important, and it can wait. So if you compartmentalize your day, not to the extent that I'm able to, literally that takes me 40 minutes at the very most, each and every day, to read and reply to all of your emails and all of those comments. And then I don't pick up the phone until the next day. So even if there's an immediate response, I wouldn't know about it until the next day. Now, I did get into a bit of a situation whereby I would then pick it up a bit later and look again, and then found myself entering into what you can only describe as a conversation by email, which I would refer to as chat. Now, as practicing Buddhist monks, we shouldn't really be chatting. This is what we would regard as sampapalapa, idle chit-chat, because even if it's Dharma related, if it's here and there and not in the appropriate time or place, and maybe not given full attention because you've already been distracted by other things going on all the day, or indeed the other way round, it's intruding on your time for practice, then it isn't appropriate. But even as lay people, we can say, okay, I'm going to look at my whatever it is, Facebook or my TikToks or my WhatsApps at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and I'll spend an hour or so on that, and then I won't look at it again until maybe 4 o'clock tomorrow, or if indeed, if you must, let's say 11 o'clock the next day on your coffee break at work, rather than continually blah, blah, blah. Now, I've actually sat, given Dharma talks or even pujas, chanting and blessings and such like in temples, and heard beep, 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 beep in the folks, the lay folks amongst them. Even I've seen monks with their phones on silent, seeing notifications during this time of important paying homage to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, this time of either meditation or listening to the Dharma. Now, these are occasions where all of those extra distractions should never be allowed in, never be invited in, never be encouraged, never be noticed. That's when phones should be always switched off. But you can, to some extent, do that. We can all do that ourselves. And I noticed by not observing that as strictly as I always have since being here, it's a little bit different when you're traveling. You might have to even look at the phone. I don't have any screen notifications, so I can look at the time or what I need to look at without knowing I've received an email or knowing I've received a comment or any of that. I don't need to know that until I'm going to be looking at it at 11 o'clock the next day or something like that. And I'm telling you about that because it's useful for you, because when I was a lay person, that's when I first started doing this. When I still was receiving text messages and the odd email and things throughout the day that were not related to my practice, I thought, well, if I just turn all that off and just look at those at a certain time of the day, I can compartmentalize that part of my life. Also, I was able then to deal with those comments and reply to those emails more efficiently and with the appropriate attention that they deserve, with the kindness that that response that is necessary for the response that's required to something you might be asked, and with the careful attention, than if you just give something a fleeting glance through the day and quickly reply. So I've yet again digressed, but I mean, I think today was perhaps the way this little chat was going. That will be my chat for the day. I didn't get around to answering your comments and questions then, but they have been seen, and I will cover them tomorrow before the next day, I think, which is then the Poya coming up, and the end of this Vasa, when, for me, the retreat continues. I don't come back from my 3 days, 3 weeks, or 1 month of solitary retreat to being normal. This is my normal. This is my practice. And this is what I endeavour to share with you via this platform, this medium, to encourage you in your own practice, which I appreciate cannot be consistently all of the time throughout your busy days, with families, with work lives, business, social life, friends, all of the outside world's goings on. But you can too make time each and every day for some Citta Viveka, which is incidentally the name of the monastery, Wat Pa, which means forest monastery, Citta Viveka, where I began and first learned about Buddhism, the Thai forest tradition, monks, bhikkhus, nuns, bhikkhunis, ordination, where I first learnt this practice. So it's a word, Citta Viveka, I hold very dearly to my heart, within my citta. And I'm sure, with its purity, that understanding in that citta, my citta, this citta, we can't call it my, the citta, maintains the momentum and the direction in which it sent me. So I had the good karma, the fortune, to turn up at Citta Viveka, which determined the future of my citta. I didn't think so at the time, but with time, that's what it's done. And that's how I came to be here, or how I've come to be here today talking to you, like this. Perhaps rather too much today. I've waffled on, as they say. So hopefully not too much in the way of sampapalapa, and something useful there for you to incorporate into your own practice. Especially turn off those notifications. Why don't you? When I was a child, we had a program on TV called Why Don't You? And it was about these children, and that was short for why don't you turn off the television and go and do something more useful or better, more interesting instead. Because in those days, the television was the new social media. And it was to encourage children to not watch television and to just go out and play outside and make something out of trees or something like that, as opposed to just being glued to the box. And it's a very useful term. Why don't you? Why don't you turn off the notifications and just look at what you need to look at an appropriate time, when you can give it your undivided attention and therefore more effectively deal with what needs dealing with, and therefore be freed up for the rest of your time to enjoy peace, tranquility of samatha. I've got the tune now in my head of that theme tune of that program, but it'll soon go away. I'll just bring my attention to the breath and say Bhutto, 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 and it's soon gone. Until next time, if there's something useful, I hope you can use it and share this if it's relevant. And if not, just let it go. Sukhi Hotu.